Tonight, the world on edge as trading partners wait on Donald Trump's tight-lipped tariff plans. Bracing for the uncertainty.
I will reject all attempts to weaken Canada.
We have our grievances with them, so why don't we sort them out without attacking each other's economies?
The political playbook to cushion Canadians against impact. The unlikely U.S. alliance to help Canada stop Trump.
I already have 3 Republicans, Senators Collins of Maine, Tillis of North Carolina, and Rand Paul of Kentucky, who said they're going to vote with me.
And who broke a record tonight on the U.S. Senate floor? The Conservatives booted from the campaign after a Liberal candidate was forced to resign.
I drive a lot. It's really great for me.
We're looking at $80 for half a tank, so about $40 cheaper altogether.
How a break from the consumer carbon tax could extend to savings beyond the pump. And a home run for a Canadian company.
We've been getting even local players here in Quebec, a lot of them.
How torpedo baseball bats could reshape Canada's sales game.
CTV National News with Omar Sachedina.
Good evening. American trading partners around the world are holding their breath tonight on the eve of new tariffs Donald Trump is expected to unleash in an effort to reshape the global economic order. And that has sent countries scrambling to fortify non-U.S. alliances. The Prime Minister today speaking to his Mexican counterpart about boosting trade. And on the campaign trail, an urgent new push to reduce dependency on a now undependable neighbor. CTV's senior political correspondent Michael Couture on this day 10.
I will reject all attempts to weaken Canada.
Political leaders were standing firm and trying to convince voters they are the one who can stand up to President Donald Trump. Instead of putting any new policy in the window, Liberal leader Mark Carney took a victory lap on canceling the consumer carbon tax, which took effect today. And he continued to say only a Liberal government will help the country weather the trade war.
We are going to be very deliberate in terms of the measures we take to fight for Canada.
There they are, all 5 of them.
Pierre Poilievre committed to implementing 5 policy recommendations from oil and gas companies in this country to speed up energy projects. The Conservative leader believes the best way to fight tariffs is to stop being dependent on the U.S.
The oil that goes from Western Canada to Ontario and Quebec actually has to go through the U.S., meaning Donald Trump has the legal power and the territorial control already to stop Canadian energy from going to Canadian consumers.
The NDP is also pitching protectionist policy. Invoking the memory of Tommy Douglas, NDP leader Jagmeet Singh said we need to save Medicare from Donald Trump.
He's not going to stop at medication. He's going to come after our public healthcare system because there's profit to be made.
One barrier to profit and trade is Quebec's language law, according to an annual report published by the U.S. All federal leaders have condemned the inclusion of Bill 96 as an irritant, but Yves-François Blanchet says that attack is another reason to vote for the Bloc Québécois.
Let's make it clear, Quebecers have the capability to say, without Quebec approval, no deal.
With the tariff announcement expected tomorrow afternoon, Mark Carney is again pausing his campaign and heading to Ottawa, where he'll shift back into prime ministerial duties in order to craft Canada's response. Omar.
All right, Mike, thank you. South of the border, a group of U.S. senators from both sides of the aisle have joined forces to protest moves, including tariffs, by Donald Trump. And tonight, New Jersey's Cory Booker made history for the longest floor speech in the U.S. Senate.
This is a moral moment. It's not left or right, it's right or wrong. Let's get in good trouble. My friend, Madam President, I yield the floor.
Booker surpassed the previous record for a speech that lasted 24 hours and 18 minutes in 1957 by Strom Thurmond against civil rights. CTV's Washington Bureau Chief Joy Malvin on the unlikely allies.
Welcome.
Who would have thought Republicans would join forces with Democrats to try to stop Donald Trump's tariffs? But here we are.
And to also have a Republican co-sponsor, Rand Paul, another Republican, Senator Collins, has indicated she'll vote with us.
The Senate vote challenges President Donald Trump's use of emergency powers over fentanyl and illegal immigration to justify hitting Canada with tariffs.
It's devastating them, because the Canadians are pissed. People in Canada think, you know what, I'm going to go buy from someone else because I can't trust this trading partner.
On the eve of what Trump calls Liberation Day, details are still a bit sketchy.
He's with his trade and tariff team right now, perfecting it to make sure this is a perfect deal for the American people.
Trump's goal, bring manufacturing and jobs back to America. But economists warn it will raise prices on pretty much everything, from groceries, electronics to cars in America.
6.5 million jobs would be impacted just by the Canada tariffs, according to the New York Times. And guess who will be particularly affected? People in red states. People in red states.
Just ask Bill Butcher. His award-winning beer, the Pilsner Malt, is grown in Canada. With tariffs on that, aluminum cans and bottle caps, he's already had to lay off 2 employees and hike prices.
How many people are still going to want to buy a 6-pack of great-tasting beer, but at $18.99. People are going to start looking for a different substitute.
The reason why
Senator Cory Booker taking a stand all day and all night, a marathon filibuster speech protesting Trump's policies.
in just 71 days, the President of the United States has inflicted so much harm on Americans.
As Canada and nations around the world brace for Trump's tariff announcement. Omar?
All right, Joy, thank you. Let's get to CTV's chief political correspondent, Vassy Kapelos. Now, Vassy, the tariff announcement is supposed to be coming down at about 4 p.m. tomorrow, and the White House is saying it's going to be one of the most important days in American history. What do you know, or what are you hearing about how the political campaigns are preparing for that announcement tomorrow?
Well, I've talked to people at the provincial level and the federal level about the plan going forward, and in particular what they're expecting tomorrow. They aren't sure is the bottom line. There have been officials at the federal and provincial level meeting with other officials at the Commerce Department in the United States, but they are being told that the final decision rests with Donald Trump, and we won't find out essentially what that is until tomorrow. As for what that means for Canada's response, I do anticipate that there will be a response from the Liberal leader, Mark Carney, acting in his capacity as Prime Minister, a more general response tomorrow. I anticipate there will be a meeting of the premiers and the Prime Minister to determine the specifics of Canada's response, because it will, Omar, depend on exactly what the President does. Is it a little, is it a lot rather, or is it something in between? Our response will likely be commensurate to a certain degree, and they want some time to be able to come up with that. So I don't anticipate the details for a couple of days, though we will have the broad strokes of how Canada is going to respond to Trump likely tomorrow. Omar?
All right, Vassy, thank you. And speaking of premiers, Alberta expects key industries in her province will escape Trump's new tariffs.
They talk about reciprocal tariffs, and so we don't have any tariffs on their oil and gas, so I'm assuming that means that they're not going to have tariffs on our oil and gas.
Danielle Smith also expects most of the province's food industry will be spared for the same reason, but says it's hard to make predictions about the U.S. president. And across the Atlantic, the European Union said it's prepared to counter-strike in the event of a trade war.
Europe has not started this confrontation. We do not necessarily want to retaliate. But if it is necessary, we have a strong plan to retaliate, and we will use it.
Knocking down internal trade barriers is one way to reduce reliance on the American market, and Mark Carney has vowed to do it by Canada Day if voters let him keep his job. CTV's Quebec Bureau Chief Geneviève Beauchemin with a closer look at some of the challenges.
For an example, on interprovincial trade, take pigs. Some pork processors in Ontario face barriers doing business just next door in Quebec.
You have to be a federally inspected plant before you can cross borders.
The movement of goods and workers across our vast country is regulated by 14 different jurisdictions, including Ottawa.
A lot of these internal barriers that are being spoken about largely arise from regulatory differences that exist between provinces.
Beer or wine producers, for instance, have been barred from shipping directly to customers in other provinces, instead forced to ship to liquor boards.
And all of these barriers they're quite burdensome for small and medium-sized enterprises.
Our new top trading partner will be Canada.
Tearing down those barriers wasn't exactly a hot political issue in the past, but this campaign, of course, is different. Trade is top of the agenda.
Removing barriers to the free movement of workers and goods and services would increase the size of our economy. This is an updated figure by $250 billion.
That's a big number, and one that has come under scrutiny, called grossly exaggerated by some.
I think politicians need to dramatically lower their expectations about what's possible from this. My sense is that they already know this, and this is largely a lot of political theater.
Some provincial governments announced they have taken steps on alcohol sales, on cutting red tape for recognizing workers' credentials. But it's unlikely all barriers will be knocked down. Quebec's French language protection and region-specific concerns are likely to remain. The goal, say analysts, is for provinces to set priorities, but also not to sacrifice on issues like consumer protection. Geneviève Beauchemin, CTV News, Montreal.
The two frontrunners in the election campaign were forced to answer questions about controversies involving their candidates. The Conservatives dropped two today, and late tonight, CTV News learned a third will no longer represent the party. Laurent Singh in the BC riding of New Westminster, Burnaby-Millardville. No reason was given. All of this after a Liberal incumbent quit under pressure. Here's CTV's Judy Trin.
The Conservatives took about an hour to drop a controversial candidate.
We fired him. He's gone.
Mark McKenzie was running in Windsor and was removed after being confronted by CTV News about this audio tape of inflammatory remarks he made in a 2022 podcast.
But I'm also in favor of public hangings, so I think they need to bring that back. If you're 100% certain, Epstein's, and this is what I'm saying, Justin Trudeau.
McKenzie, a city councillor and former radio personality, says the Conservatives knew about the comments before he was chosen to run. He says he didn't get a chance to defend himself.
I heard that the party was aware of it, and I said, I'll send you every podcast that we recorded. And they just said, nope, you're not the candidate anymore.
Montreal candidate Stéphane Marquis says he was dismissed in a call lasting seconds after the Conservatives scoured his social media, which included conspiracy theories about vaccines and the global banking system. Another post called Quebec a disgrace and its people shameless socialists. That's in contrast to how Liberals dealt with Paul Chang, who in an interview in January with Mingpao News told people to collect a bounty by turning over Conservative rival Joe Tay to the Chinese government. Tay was critical of China's suppression of civil freedoms in Hong Kong. 5 days after Chinese media found out, Chang quit, stating that as the Prime Minister and Team Canada stand up to Donald Trump, he didn't want to be a distraction.
As I said yesterday, his comments were deeply troubling and regrettable. We will move on with looking for a new candidate.
40 democracy groups from across the globe demanded Carney fire Chang. Others called for the RCMP to investigate whether Chang violated Canada's foreign interference law, a law the Trudeau Liberals drafted.
I thought that was unbecoming for a party leader to allow your potential MP running in an election to openly disparage and the opponent this way.
Carney has seen a recent surge in support, but in some ethnically diverse ridings, his lack of action on this issue could have an impact among Canadian immigrants who fear repression from the authoritarian countries they left. Omar.
Judy Trin in Winnipeg. Judy, thanks. If you filled up your car today, you might have noticed some savings at the pump. The consumer carbon tax was scrapped, and as CTV's Alex Carper reports, it won't just make gas cheaper.
This is no April Fool's joke. Many Canadians seeing significant drops at the pump.
I drive a lot. It's really great for me.
I did not know about it, so here I am filling it up when I can.
That's a big drop, and you save some money.
Prices in the Greater Toronto area fell almost 20 cents overnight to 136.9. Drivers on the prairies and in Atlantic Canada also seeing similar results.
We're looking at 80 for half a tank, so about $40 cheaper altogether.
With us being able to save back a cent on the gas price, it does stretch our dollar a bit more, so it's welcome.
Quebec is now the only province that hasn't abandoned carbon pricing, but most of the country will see savings, and not just on gas. Groceries could see a drop too. For example, grocer Munther Zeed says he estimates he'll be able to reduce prices in the range of 10 to 50 cents per item because all of his goods are transported by vehicle.
I mean, we're still going to have to pay a fuel surcharge no matter what on cost of goods coming in, but hopefully that cost goes down, which eventually will save the customer some money.
Experts say there also could be savings elsewhere, including natural gas, propane, and other items too.
Clothing and apparel, or other types of transportation, or even things like alcohol sales, that kind of thing.
So while there is some relief at the pumps, the end of the carbon tax also means the end of those quarterly carbon rebate checks, with one final payment coming on April 22nd. Alex Karpas, CTV News, Winnipeg.
Coming up.
It is quite shocking to see
why a rental truck went off the road hitting pedestrians in Boston. Plus, what sparked this massive fireball in Malaysia?
Tomorrow.
But I am here trying to get better.
He's behind bars for a sexual assault conviction, but now linked to the outside.
We have devices that are connected to the internet.
The surprising reason prisoners are allowed to go online. W5 investigates tomorrow on CTV National News and ctvnews.ca.
U.S. federal prosecutors have been directed to seek the death penalty for the man accused of killing a healthcare CEO on the streets of New York. Luigi Mangione is accused of shooting United Health CEO Brian Thompson last year. He was arrested after a 5-day manhunt that made headlines around the world. Mangione also faces state charges of murder as an act of terrorism and has pleaded not guilty.
We know enough right now preliminary to seem that it seems more to be a tragic accident.
Police in Boston are investigating after a rental truck veered off the road, hitting pedestrians and flipping on its side. At least 6 people were injured, including one in critical condition. A massive fireball erupted after a gas pipeline burst outside Malaysia's biggest city, injuring 145 people. The flames shot up 20 stories high and took hours to extinguish. Nearly 200 homes were damaged. The death toll from last Friday's devastating earthquake in Myanmar is now expected to rise to more than 3,000 as crews continue to rescue victims trapped in the rubble. Myanmar's ongoing civil war is also preventing help from reaching some areas. And a volcano erupted near Iceland's capital today, forcing tourists and residents to flee a nearby town and one of Iceland's biggest tourist attractions, the Blue Lagoon Spa. Still ahead.
A 3-run home run for Jazz Chisholm.
The Canadian connection to baseball's new secret weapon. A former NFL star is the latest high-profile athlete to have his home burglarized. Richard Sherman posted this break-in video. You can see 3 armed intruders smash into his house. The robbery took place in Washington state last weekend. Sherman says his wife and children were at home at the time, but were unharmed. NFL quarterbacks Patrick Mahomes, Joe Burrow, and hockey star Evgeny Malkin have also been victims of break-ins. Last night, we told you about a new bat shaking up Major League Baseball. The torpedo bats are propelling players' batting averages to new heights. And as CTV's John Venevali Rao explains, a Canadian company is also scoring big.
At Quebec City-based B45, they've been making baseball bats for more than 20 years. And last spring started experimenting with a new design they'd seen called the torpedo that initially got a tepid response.
The torpedoes themselves, we've been aware of them for around a year. It just never really caught on.
A 3-run home run for Jazz Chisholm.
But after the Yankees, many using torpedo bats, started this season by hitting 15 homers over 3 games, including a team record 9 on Saturday, the bats are now all the talk of baseball.
All of a sudden, the Yankees game on Saturday just changed the narrative completely.
And this Canadian bat maker's now getting a crush of requests.
We've been getting even local players here in Quebec, a lot of them, but we've been getting requests in Japan and Taiwan, and obviously in the States with the professional players being a major part of it.
The bat was developed by a physicist and former Yankees coach and is custom designed for each player. It has more wood in the middle of the barrel at the so-called sweet spot. In addition to the Yankees, they're being used by players on the Rays, Blue Jays, Twins, and others.
Exactly the benefits or the advantages it has, we're kind of working through.
B45 supplied Blue Jay Davis Schneider with 2 bats.
He already made another order of 12 torpedo bats.
As for Major League Baseball, it says the bats are legal, though some call it cheating.
I don't think he's cheating, honestly. They just changed the shape of a bat, At the end of the day, it's still a one-piece solid wood.
And while some think the bats are overhyped,
high drive, right field.
The stats will tell the tale in the coming months. John Benavalli-Rouse, CTV News, Toronto.
Still ahead, our cross-country campaign checkup brings us to a place known as Canada's most notorious city. Tonight's voter profile takes us to a place known as Canada's most notorious city. Moose Jaw, Saskatchewan has a lot at stake in this election. CTV's Alison Bamford explains why.
A city rich in history, culture, and art, Moose Jaw has many claims to fame. The world's tallest moose, home of the Canadian Forces snowbirds, and Canada's most notorious city.
On the tourism side of things, it's huge.
Moose Jaw has strong ties to the Prohibition era and American gangster Al Capone. Legend has it, bootleggers used these underground tunnels to smuggle booze in the 1920s.
We are a tourist destination for sure.
70,000 visitors walked through the tunnels last year, almost all of them tourists from outside the city. With the growing uncertainty south of the border, they hope to drum up more domestic tourism this summer without losing their American visitors.
I believe we were just shy of 20% of our visitors did come from the United States.
Tourism's a big economic driver for the city. Thousands are visiting this week for the World Men's Curling Championship. Most people we spoke to were focused on that, but those following the election closely have concerns.
The division is too strong. The way people speak to each other, the way politicians speak to each other is unfortunately a negative rhetoric.
Bernice Broder is visiting from the Yukon. She wants the next federal government to address the countrywide doctor shortage.
I'm seeing a long wait for things like hip surgery, knee surgery.
But the economy and Donald Trump's tariffs are top of mind for those living in Moose Jaw.
He wants to fix his country, that's fine. Please don't damage ours.
And while the city takes a break from politics to host an international event, those watching want Canada's future leader to take out any tariff threat. Alison Bamford, CTV News, Moose Jaw.
And that's a snapshot of this Tuesday. For all of us at CTV National News, thank you for watching. Good night, and see you tomorrow.